Welcome, dear all. Good morning, good afternoon, depending to where you're following us from. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our webinar, Faith Action to Stop EACOP. Today, we come together as a community driven by faith and a shared commitment to environmental justice. We are so glad to have you with us as we discuss this matter of today. And we appreciate you to have also dedicated your time to be with us. So we invite you to go to the interpretation icon down on your screen. You see the sign of globe. Click on it and change your language. If you are using French, you will hear everything in French. We have spontaneous interpretation. If you are using English, you can remain on this main. Some speakers will be speaking in French, others will be speaking in English. Therefore, it will be up to you, but to really tell you when it comes to French speaking or English speaking. In chat box, the country where you are from. Yes. So we are going to start now with a word of prayer, and we request that the opening prayer be on a screen. Then we shall invite Father Benedict Ayodi to read our prayer. We read it in English, but the Francophone people, you will have it in French on a screen.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. I hope you can hear me, right?
Yes, Father.
Yeah, and so let us begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Creator God, you who willed every creature, from the greatest to the smallest, and created them through your love, open our eyes so that we may see the richness and fragility of biodiversity threatened by the EACOP project, so that we may also see all the destruction that this project and other fossil fuel extraction projects can cause by damaging the climate, which is one of the gifts you have given us and on which we depend. Lord Jesus, you have always stood by the poorest and most fragile. Open our ears so that we may hear the cry of the displaced who are deprived of the means to live with dignity because of the ECO project. Open our ears too to the cries of all those who are fighting against this project and who are being silenced by failure to respect the most basic human rights. Holy Spirit, you who inspire the prophets to denounce all injustices, open our mouths so that we can be heard through our voices, all those that we want to stifle, the voice of the earth and the voice of the poor. Help us to find the words to speak the truth and to make people understand the urgent need to act, to find other paths than those projects that hurt our common home and those who live in it. God of love, open our hearts that we may be united, attentive, committed, and courageous. May the suffering of the land and the men and women of Uganda and Tanzania be our suffering. and may we act with them for a world renewed by your love. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the Father, the
Amen.
Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Father Ben. Now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our webinar once again, Faith Action to Stop EACOP. Today, we come together as a community driven by faith and a shared commitment to environmental justice. My name is Stephen Kezamutima. I'm the Francophone Africa Programs Coordinator at Laudato Si Movements, and I'll be the moderator of this webinar. And I will get a chance to introduce each panelist with us here today. Once again, I thank you all for finding time to be with us to discuss on this matter of EACOP. Before we begin, remember to choose your interpretation language, English or French. You just go down on your screen. You will see a globe icon. Click on it to give you French or English, depending to the language of your choice. Now we thank you. As we gather, we cannot ignore the stark reality before us. The East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline, EACOP projects that threaten to exacerbate environmental degradation and accelerate the climate crisis in East Africa. In the face of such challenges, it is imperative that we draw upon the teachings of our faith traditions to guide our responses. The concept of climate justice, deeply intertwined with Catholic social teaching and echoed in various faiths around the world, compels us to stand in solidarity with the earth and all its inhabitants. Throughout history, faith communities, including the Catholic Church, has been champions of environmental stewardship and justice. Today, we honor their legacy and recognize the critical role that they continue to play in advocating for the protection of our planet. The EACOP projects represent not only an environmental threat, but also a moral challenge. As people of faith, we cannot remain silent in the face of such injustice. We must mobilize our communities, engage in advocacy efforts, and work tirelessly to halt the construction of EACOP. Our faith-based approach offers us a powerful framework for action. By grounding ourselves in principles of compassion, justice, and solidarity, we can amplify our voices and effect meaningfully change. So let us unite in faith and action as we confront the EACOP projects head on. Together, we can make a difference and pave the way for a more just and a sustainable future for all. So we thank you for joining us once again in this crucial conversation. And by this, I would like to take chance to welcome our first panelist, Diana Naburima. She's from Afiego, Uganda. Diana, we welcome, and you'll have time to introduce yourself, introduce Afiego, and take us through your presentation. Thank you. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen, and Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are. As I've been introduced, my name is Diana Nabiruma, and I work for a Ugandan non-profit called African Institute for Energy Governance. That's a mouthful, so we often just call ourselves AFIEGO. And AFIEGO does a number of things, or we have a number of focuses as an organization. And one of those focuses is trying to stop the expansion of the fossil fuel industry in the African Great Lakes region. So not only Uganda, but the African Great Lakes region at large. And we know that we can't tell people to stop using dirty forms of energy without providing alternatives for them. So in addition to our work to stop harmful fossil fuel projects, AFIEGO also works towards ensuring that people have access to clean energy. Today, I'm going to speak to you about the EACOP project, and I will share why it's a risky project and why all of you are doing a great job, or perhaps need to do more, or what more you can do in order to try and stop development of the project. So I thought I would begin my presentation by situating us, because I know some people might be interacting with the EACOP for the first time. And I'll give you a very brief history of Uganda's oil and gas industry, the fledgling industry. So Uganda discovered commercial quantities of oil in 2006. The discoveries were made in what we call the Albertine Graben in Western Uganda. The Albertine Graben is part of, I'm so sorry, someone has distracted me. So the Albertine Graben is part of the East African Rift, and it is the western part of the East African Rift. It's a very biodiverse and very eco-sensitive area. Very briefly, the Albertine Graben is home to over 50% of Africa's bird species, nearly 40% of Africa's mammal species. It's also home to plant species, reptiles, and other forms of life. In Uganda, the Albertine Graben is home to 7 out of 10 of Uganda's national parks. It's also home to several forest reserves that are important for climate stabilization, among others. Now, when oil discoveries were made in that very eco-sensitive and biodiverse Albertine Graben, there were worries. And conservationists, as well as other human rights defenders, said that perhaps it wouldn't be good to extract oil from the Graben. But the Ugandan government, working alongside Total Energies from France, as long as China National Offshore Oil Corporation, or CNOOC from China, decided to go ahead to commercialize Uganda's oil finds. And they decided to commercialize these oil finds, which are 6.5 billion barrels to date, and of those, up to 1.7 billion barrels are recoverable. So the Ugandan government and the two companies that I mentioned decided to commercialize the oil finds through the Tilenga and the Kingfisher oil project. So these are upstream projects through which oil is supposed to be extracted, and it's supposed to be evacuated from Uganda to the port of Tanga in Tanzania through the EACOP, or the East African Crude Oil Pipeline. I imagine that a number of us know that the EACOP is a planned 1,443-kilometer pipeline. If it's constructed, it would be the longest electrically heated crude oil pipeline in the world, and it would transport 216,000 barrels of crude oil at a peak production. That is problematic. Why? Now, in order for the EACOP to be developed, over 13,000 households with hundreds of thousands of people, if you combine with the Tilenga project, and if we don't include the Kingfisher project, just the Tilenga and ECO project have resulted into the displacement of over 120,000 people. And these people are from a certain number, tens of thousands of households. But we like to speak, well, the company likes to speak, the EACOP company likes to speak in terms of affected households. We like to speak in terms of affected people, because households are fewer than the number of affected people, and that makes the project looks like it hasn't done a lot of damage to a lot of people. Now, when the people were displaced, they suffered a number of impacts. Because most of us on this in this webinar are from Africa, we know that land is the biggest factor of production for the majority of Africa's population. If you displace people from their land, it means that you've affected their social, economic, and other aspects of life. So what happened when the over 13,000 households were displaced for the EACOP? In Uganda, the number of displaced households is over 3,000. And AFIEGO conducted research in 2023, that was last year, to determine what the impact of displacement of people for the EACOP was. And we found, so in the research, which we did over a number of months, we sampled over 200 households from over 6 districts where people are being displaced for the pipeline. And when we did our research, we assessed whether the affected people considered the compensation that they received to be adequate and whether they replaced the land that they lost to the project. Now, 96.6% of the affected people that participated in the research that we conducted noted that the cash compensation they received did not enable them to get replacement land equivalent to that taken for the EACOP. And 78.1% of the affected people who participated in the research told us that this happened because they were paid delayed, inadequate, and unfair compensation. As a result, they were unable to find replacement land anywhere else of equal value. Moreover, the people noted that for those who replaced land, the replacement land that they got was less fertile. In Uganda, if you have money, a certain amount of money, you'll be able to purchase land. But the more money you have, the more you're able to buy land that is fertile. So because the affected people did not receive adequate compensation, they were unable to replace their land with other fertile land. We saw that this affected their crop productivity levels, with the affected households noting that their crop productivity declined by 14.8%, especially for those who are harvesting over 51 kilograms of crops per year. The annual incomes of the affected people also reduced, with 20.8% of the affected people who used to earn over Ugandan shillings 300,000, noting that they were no longer earning that amount of money. The people also noted that they had acquired loans, and most of them acquired loans, or 65.8% acquired loans, in order to buy food, because when the people's land was taken for the project, the land acquisition processes started in 2018 with people being informed that their land was going to be taken. Cut-off dates were placed on the affected people's property. Some of these dates were in 2018, while others were in 2019. And through those cut-off dates, the affected people were told that they could not grow perennial food and cash crops. This means that they could not, some of them could not feed their families, and as a result, they borrowed money. And then we also found, the research found that 37% school-age-going children were out of school, and the majority of these, or 21%, were girls. Now, as I indicated when I was starting this presentation, land is a huge factor of production. If you take people's land, then you affect their capacity to earn a living. So the affected people told us that because they hadn't received adequate compensation, or that the compensation was delayed, land use restrictions had been placed on their property, they were unable to grow crops, and therefore they were unable to participate in trade the way they usually did. And as a result, some of them were unable to take their children to school. Now, in Uganda, it's been said that the EACOP is very important, and I think this is true for Tanzania as well, because it's going to economically develop the country and will result in job creation. But when we did our research, none of the people from the sampled households, the over 200 households that we sampled across 6 of the 10 districts where the EACOP will pass, were employed by the EACOP company or the oil and gas sector. And so the EACOP has had huge social impacts. I could take about 5 hours talking about them, but the factor that people's land was taken resulted in a reduced access to land. It resulted in reduced access to food. It affected children's education, and especially girls' education. It increased gender-based violence. It increased family breakdowns with women or husbands leaving their wives or husbands, etc. So the project has had a huge social impact so far. And we are worried that when construction of the pipeline starts, because the construction phase hasn't started, there will be even huger impacts on the environment and therefore the people. And so this brings me to a discussion on what are the environmental impacts of the EACOP, or what are the risks of the EACOP, because we haven't documented any environmental impacts at the moment in Uganda. Now, I thought that I would start off this presentation by pointing out to you that the oil that's going to be extracted under the Tilenga project, and that oil which will be evacuated to export markets via the EACOP, part of the oil is supposed to be extracted from Murchison Falls National Park. This national park is one of Uganda's oldest, largest, and most visited. As a result, it's important for biodiversity conservation. By the virtue of the fact that it's big, it means that it hosts a huge number of Uganda's, or a huge quantity of Uganda's biodiversity. The national park is also important to Uganda's tourism sector. Tourism is a very, very, very important economic sector to Uganda. In fact, in the last financial year, it was responsible for the highest export earnings that Uganda earned. Now, what is Total planning to do? I've shown you a map on the screen. Total is planning or has already started developing well pads through which oil will be extracted. Now, of the over 400 wells under the Tilenga project, 130 are within Murchison Falls National Park, and those oil wells will be drilled through 10 well pads that I've shown. Now, that oil that's drilled will be transported via what we call a Victoria Nile crossing. It will be taken to a central processing facility where it will be cleaned, and then it will be taken to the industrial area where it will be transported via the EACOP. Development of infrastructure in a national park is terrible because it opens up the national park to poachers, to more traffic, which means that biodiversity is subject to being killed in road accidents. But also there are endangered species such as elephants that are very sensitive to vibrations. I'm told that elephants can feel vibrations from within 10 to 14 kilometers away. And with a rig, an oil rig has been developed in Murchison Falls National Park. And in fact, drilling was launched in June last year, but no commercial drilling has started yet. And so with drilling causing vibrations, with more cars in the national park, communities that live around the national park have indicated that they've suffered more human-wildlife conflict in the form of elephants. More elephants are moving out of the park. They've destroyed vast quantities of croplands, but they've also killed people, unfortunately. At the last count, it was 5 people that had been killed. Now, away from the drilling in Murchison Falls National Park for the Tilenga project, there is also a challenge with the fact that the EACOP itself is supposed to be constructed through forest reserves, nature reserves, wetlands, and other eco-sensitive areas, both in Uganda and Tanzania. And one of the most worrisome issues for us is that nearly a third of the EACOP is supposed to be constructed in the Lake Victoria Basin. Lake Victoria is not only Africa's largest freshwater lake, but it's also the second largest freshwater lake in the world. There are concerns that constructing a pipeline through the Lake Victoria Basin could lead to contamination of Lake Victoria, and the millions and millions of people that rely on the services provided by the lake, such as the water, hydroelectric power generation, fishing, and others could be negatively impacted. Some modeling was done, and this modeling showed that indeed, if an oil spill occurred around the River Kagera crossing point of the EACOP, the crossing point of the EACOP, then Lake Victoria could be contaminated. I live in Kampala. Sam is on this call, on this webinar. He lives in Okay, he lives in Mukono, I think, or Kampala. And also other people who are on this call and live in Kampala, most of us get water from Lake Victoria. So it's very worrisome that the EACOP is going to affect wetlands, and nearly a third of it is located in the Lake Victoria Basin. Now, the other issue is the fact that the pipeline is set to affect wetlands. I don't think I need to go into why wetlands are very valuable and why we need to be conserving them. But I thought I would point out that Afiego procured a wetlands expert last year who produced a fact sheet for us that indicated that in Uganda, the EACOP will cross 158 wetland sections. And of these, 17 wetlands drain into Lake Victoria, which I just talked about, 8 wetlands drain into the Victoria Nile, which is going to be crossed by the Victoria Nile pipeline crossing in Murchison Falls National Park. So those are 2 huge infrastructure that are set to affect the Victoria Nile, and it's going to affect 4 wetlands draining into the Lake Victoria Basin. There are concerns, but I thought I'd point out of these wetlands, all are valuable, but the fact that the EACOP is set to cross the Kiva Levokora wetland system in Raka in Chotera district in southern Uganda is very, very concerning, because not only is this wetland connected to River Rizi, which supplies water to millions and millions of people in western Uganda, but that wetland is also important for the survival of the Lake Mburo Nakivale Ramsar site. The wetland is also the biggest in the Sangobe Musambwa Island of Kagera or Samuka wetland system, whose economic value is 117 million per year. If you can, I would advise you, if you're a man, please visit Musambwa Island. It is very, very scenic, very conservationist in nature. People there do not kill snakes. It's a breeding ground for several bird species. It's a very, very beautiful area, which could potentially be negatively impacted because of the EACOP. The EACOP is also going to go affect several rivers and forests in Uganda. And of concern is the fact that it's going to pass between Wambabia and Bugoma forests in the Albertine Graben, which I talked about at the beginning in Western Uganda. Wambabia and Bugoma are home to some of the last surviving chimpanzees that we have in Uganda. In fact, before Bugoma forest started being destroyed, it was home to over 600 chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are very important. I think they are the closest, some of the closest species to the human DNA. They are used for research purposes, and they are important for human survival, but also for tourism purposes. In terms of carbon emissions, it's estimated that at peak production, the oil transported by the EACOP, if it is burned, it will result in the production of over 34 million metric tons of carbon per year. That's more than what Uganda and Tanzania currently produce. And in the face of the climate crisis, we don't want to worsen the climate crisis that we are facing. As a result, we are campaigning and saying that we want Uganda to develop, but constructing a pipeline or extracting oil from national parks and other areas at a time when scientists have said that no new oil fields should be opened up isn't the way to develop. And so we are saying no to the EACOP, no to oil extraction in national parks in Uganda, no to infrastructure that's affecting biodiversity and people negatively. So what can faith communities do to ensure that they amplify the voices that are saying no to the EACOP? So raising awareness amongst religious leaders and other stakeholders about the dangers of the EACOP would help us in our movement building efforts so that we can create pressure to stop the pipeline. There's also, if you can support us to engage faith leaders to speak on the risks of the projects to government officials in Uganda and Tanzania, but also when they are preaching in church. That would help us to further build a movement. And religious leaders are very important. We believe that if they spoke up, the Ugandan government and indeed companies that are involved in the EACOP project, who are Total, CNOOC, as well as the Ugandan and Tanzanian governments, would perhaps listen and stop the harmful the harmful project. Then also calling on financial institutions not to invest in the project, and particularly Chinese financial institutions. That would be helpful. A number of financial institutions, over 20 banks and over 20 insurers or reinsurers have said that they won't be participating in the project, thanks to the campaigning of partners under the Stop EACOP project. But no financial institution from China has committed not to finance the project. In fact, the news we have is that there are discussions ongoing between the Ugandan government and other stakeholders, and that Chinese financial institutions could support the project. We don't want this to happen, so we are calling on you. If you have the power, and you have the power to engage financial institutions. And then some will speak about divestment, so asking faith leaders to divest from companies that are participating in the project, especially Total and the Chinese company, which is Sinopec. That would be great. But there are also other companies that are participating in the project. So if any religious institutions are invested in companies that are participating in the EACOP, Chileng and Kingfisher projects, please call on them to divest. Then we ask you to amplify our litigation efforts. This will help us create public awareness, but also public pressure for good outcomes. Unfortunately, our courts are captured. They do what the executive or the Ugandan government wants them to do. And we've therefore had a number of bad outcomes. But we believe that if we create public awareness, that's a win. And also if we create public pressure, we want the courts to be independent, perhaps we would also win. And then there are several social media channels. At the beginning, I indicated what Afiego's Twitter handle is. It's at Afiego UG. There's a Stop EACOP handle. It's at Stop EACOP. There's a Laudato Si X handle or Twitter handle. Please amplify our messages when we post so that we can reach as many people as possible. We can create as much noise as possible because there is power in useful noise. Thank you for listening to me. I think I've spoken for over 25 minutes that I was allotted. Stephen, please forgive me. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Diana. This is very interesting for this rich presentation, very informative. Thank you for taking us to the grounds in Uganda, the situation of what's happening as an impact to various level. And we thank you also for calling the faith groups to give, highlighting us what we can do. We thank you also for just connecting us, even through your social media, just simple action that people can do in supporting this campaign of stopping EACOP. So I'm going to invite people to write in the chat box questions that you have, so that before Diana leaves, she can respond to some in the chat box. And we're gonna invite our next panelist. Then after, we can allow Diana to respond maybe to one or two questions. Et j'aimerais aussi rappeler ceux qui n'ont pas encore parvenu à changer la langue. Nous avons interprétation simultanée. Donc, vous allez sur votre écran, en bas, il y a un signe de globe, puis vous cliquez, ça vous donne la langue anglaise ou française. Vous choisissez votre langue. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to invite Samuel Okuloni. He's from EGI, Uganda. Samuel, take it from here and introduce yourself, EGI, and the work related to EACOP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be able to be part of this call and speaking to you. And coming after Diana, I hope you can be able to see my screen. Basically, I'll be talking about strategies for climate resilience. What is the role of ethical investment? We are coming in specifically talk about ethical investment because of the challenges that EACOP has presented on the Ugandan people and Tanzanian people, and at the global stage at large, looking into the era of climate change. What do we know and what do we need in terms of where do we need to put our money in? Just for background purposes, I'll be speaking in regards to what is ethical investment. You'll appreciate with me that it simply involves standards. Specifically, you find that it might go beyond personal standards. But what is society looking into in where are you putting in the money? Normally, these investments are aligned with with the morals of the investors or principles of the investors are looking into society. Normally, we have seen that much of the activities that are deemed unethical, such as alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and now fossil fuels, are areas that investors need to completely avoid in terms of putting in their money. Why they escalate human rights violations, they lead to a lot of killing, mass displacement of people. Just the photo on my right, you find that this is where a project of fossil fuel in nature displacing thousands of people from their land. And they had to go on and make makeshift houses. These are children that need protected. The Bible says, bring children unto me, them and putting them in so-called inhuman settlements. It's something that is unhuman in terms of and somebody trying to make profit. But looking into the history on how did we come about with ethical investment trade, where in America, the church, the religious leaders specifically restricted participating or putting investments in slave trade. It was a movement that took longer until it was accepted inside that slave trade needs to be
Excuse
abolished.
Samuel, could you improve maybe volume on your side, your voice, so that the interpreter can get, well, we lost you somewhere, your voice was far. Thank you.
Is it better now?
Yes, if you can keep it constant.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was basically looking into the road course, the road or the history of ethical investment that was tracing way back to the 18th century, whereby slave trade in America was a big issue. And religious leaders came in together saying, this is not an area that we need to invest money in. And they made calls. It was a big movement calling on every responsible institution to prioritize responsible investment, ethical investment, and slave trade was later on abolished. But now we are faced with a challenge. Climate change is a cross-cutting issue, and more people in the global south are more affected than the global north per se. You have seen mass displacement of people from their land.
Somewhere we've lost
To
you
pave way
somewhere.
for
Could
somebody to
you?
make profit over people. And it's a big call saying we need to have responsible investment that aligns with our ethics and personal moral. And seeing the photo that was referring to just on the internet connection in Uganda.
I'm sorry, maybe you might have a problem of internet.
Stephen, are you able to hear me?
I don't know what about others.
Yes, Stephen,
If it
can
is,
you hear me? Can you hear me? I can hear you.
yes, now I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, great. I can proceed. I was saying that now we are faced with the big challenge of climate change. It affects us across all divides, both in Africa and in Europe and in the global scale. We need to tackle the challenge, but then there are still investments going into climate change, and it's the reason why we are appealing to religious leaders in this call. But what is the alternative? What is the better alternative in terms of the impacts of climate change, and how can we be able to? We are basically saying we need to transition away from fossil fuels into a clean energy future, and that would equate to ethical investment. And there are quite a number of opportunities that we can be able to generate from transitioning into a renewable energy future, specifically in Africa. Projections by 2040 indicate that we'll be able to have nearly 2.5 billion people in Africa. Will be actually the projections in terms of the population growth mean that by 2050 we'll be having about 2.5 billion people, and about 8 of it will be residing in sub-Saharan Africa. But currently, I think less than half of this population actually has access to clean energy. However, we know that a reduction in carbon emissions could significantly benefit our GDP, enhance job creation, and improve the welfare. That means we need to move away from fossil fuels like yesterday. And specifically, this will mean that we need to mitigate the impacts of climate change, improve the public health, and foster growth of new industries which are supported by energy transition. The fossil fuel industry has caused a lot of devastation. The photo on my left is specifically taken from Kingfisher, one of the projects that is expected to be generating oil that will be transported through the EACOP. As you can clearly see, near the lake shore, the water is getting polluted. But this is the area that the fishermen depend on in terms of fishing to support their economic activity. Their boats are in trying to go to do fishing. However, they're no longer getting fish. One, there are restrictions in terms of them accessing the lake. And when they access the lake, they are being beaten, they are tortured, which is a key economic activity. But if we are transitioned into clean energy, the fishermen would be able to continue in terms of their fishing and will be able to meet our energy needs of our ever-growing population in Africa, improving our GDP and job creation in the region. IRENA indicated that energy transition has a significant potential for job creation. By 2030, we expect to get about 9 million additional jobs if we transition to clean energy, and this is on a net 1.5 scenario. And by 2050, there will be a further 3 million jobs created. And that means by 2050, when we have 2.5 billion people in Africa, we'll be having an additional 12 million jobs by this time, under the 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario. But currently, we're already in 2020 has already passed. If we had started stopping the investments in fossil fuels that have significantly devastated the lives of the people in Uganda, Tanzania, especially via the EACOP, this means that we would be having about 0.3 million jobs already. And by 2030, we would have about 8 million jobs. So there's a lot of potential in terms of the clean energy future if we are to transition. And this is an area that we need to move away from fossil fuels into clean energy future. And what does this represent? It's about 20-fold increase from the current level by 2050, and a quadruple of the current jobs that have been generated on a scenario, if you compare with the scenario without oil or without energy transition. And the key areas of growth specifically include solar energy, looking into wind energy, looking into many hydros, but many hydro dams have as well increased the human rights violations in terms of mass displacement of people from their land. And you cannot be able to invest in an area that causes human rights violations. We would equate this to blood oil investments, blood diamonds that profit other people at the expense of others. How can we be able to have investments in renewable energy infrastructure that drive prosperity? We talked about job creation.
Try to wrap up. We have 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you. We're looking into what are the investment opportunities that can drive prosperity. Job creation transitioning into clean energy future means that there will be jobs that will be created that will benefiting people, benefiting all aspects of the economy, will be able to alleviate the poverty levels, able to alleviate the unemployment. There will be investment traction coming into the region that will be creating more jobs. There will be energy access whereby we don't have to depend on imports of fossil fuels from other countries, but we'll be able to be energy secure. And Africa will be able to dictate the terms of energy generation by its own, but not leaving people impoverished, like somebody putting in, I love my house, but he can't even repair it because EACOP is putting him in the state that he may not be able, he's not sure when he will be able to leave the area. There are quite a number of potential benefits that will be able to replace the heavy dependence on fossil fuels and even dependence on firewood. And what can we do? As I conclude, as religious institutions, you have the power, you have the bigger mass following, and are trusted by millions of people around the world. Let's engage our investment banks, insurance companies, financial institutions to demand that they have responsible investment in clean energy and leave out fossil fuels. And religious leaders can be able to reach out to shareholders of different companies that are investing in fossil fuels to divest away from fossil fuel industries and make our voices heard, and to move together we can be able to stop the destruction of our planet and let the world breathe on clean energy future. Thank you very much.
We thank you. We thank you so much, Samuel, for this rich presentation also that you've given us, especially tackling the very crucial part, which is the solution part, the alternative part. Because many people, they question, that is where they question when we say we stop EACOP or any oil extraction, gas extraction. But they ask, what do you bring as a solution? What's the alternative? So somewhere you've mentioned a number of them. It's up to us to think on how to capitalize on that in our campaigns, in our work. Thank you. And I know some questions, we find them in the chat box. You will also be able to respond to some. And we will also raise some unresponded one. We also invite our participants to write in chat box and appreciate the presentation of Samuel, Diana, and the others who are coming on board. At this juncture, I would love to request the next panelist to make sure you raise voice as you speak so that our interpreter can get you well. And informing the audience that the next panelist, I'm sure he will speak in French, is Baraka Mugisho from DRC, eastern part of DRC. Goma, where he's an activist. They've been campaigning for Save Virunga campaign. He has an experience that he's coming to share with us. And so, Mugisho, if you speak in French, inviting the Anglophones to be the ones now to change the language. You come down the bottom side of the globe and get the English. You click and choose English. Then you get your interpretation. Baraka, bienvenue et merci beaucoup.
Bonjour à tous et bonsoir à tous et encore parce que les airs ne sont pas conformes. Bon, je m'appelle Baraka Mugisho, je suis étudiant et animateur Laudato dans en RDC, mais aussi je suis un acteur qui milite pour les droits sociaux et dans la lucha, un mouvement citoyen résident en République démocratique du Congo. Il m'a été demandé très brièvement de parler sur les actions que nous faisons sur terrain en se penchant sur la campagne Stop EACOP. Ici, en RDC, plus précisément en République démocratique du Congo, à Goma, là où je suis maintenant, nous faisons des sortes de campagnes, des sortes des actions. Il y a des actions de sensibilisation, il y a aussi les actions de plaidoyer. Pourquoi nous faisons des actions de sensibilisation? Parce que la grande partie de la population s'intéresse moins à la crise climatique et malgré les conséquences vécues et ressenties ici récemment par la population, par exemple à Kinshasa, il y avait eu la montée du fleuve Congo à Kalehe, dans la province du Sud Kivu, il y avait eu des pluies diluviennes. Et à Minova, là où il y a des carrés miniers, il y avait eu des éboulements de terre. Ce sont des conséquences liées au changement climatique. Nous sensibilisons pour que la population comprenne les dangers qui est là, en fait, de passer à des actions concrètes. Pourquoi aussi nous menons des actions de plaidoyer pour essayer d'influencer des personnes et les politiques publiques pour provoquer un changement. Cela implique d'exercer une influence sur la paix, sur les personnes au pouvoir pour qu'ils agissent de manière plus équitable, en fait d'instaurer la justice et de lutter contre les causes liées au changement climatique. Parmi nos cibles, il y a des cibles. Nos cibles sont des universités, nos cibles sont des écoles, nos cibles sont des marchés publics. Ici, récemment, je me souviens, nous avons mené une action. Ici, récemment, je me souviens, nous avons mené une action dans une université de la place dénommée la Sampiesia, où d'ailleurs les recteurs, il est prêtre catholique et aussi animateur du mouvement Laudato. Il était question d'examiner les enjeux des méga pétroliers EACOP et l'apport de la femme dans la crise climatique. La photo que vous voyez ici, c'était pour dire aux grands investisseurs qui financent ces projets EACOP de ne plus financer parce que parce que l'extraction du pétrole a des conséquences néfastes sur la population, sur l'environnement. Ça pollue même l'air et ça a des conséquences sur les revenus de la population, vie même la production agricole. Mais aussi, dans cette conférence, nous avions essayé de montrer comment est-ce que le gouvernement ougandais avait mis en place un projet de vente des blocs pétroliers qui se trouvait à cheval avec la RDC dans la région d'Albertine pour acheminer du pétrole jusqu'à Tanzanie. Nous avons aussi rappelé que le gouvernement congolais et le gouvernement ougandais sont en pourparlers à propos de la construction de ces projets désastreux qui va relier bien sûr la rive ougandaise du lac Albert à l'océan Indien en Tanzanie qui va passer par le Congo. Il s'agit pour les deux pays. Aujourd'hui, ils sont dans des compromis pour trouver un protocole d'accord commun pour l'exploitation du pétrole dans l'espace albertine. La RDC et l'Ouganda se partagent les bassins très riches en pétrole de la région de l'Albertine. Ça, j'aimerais souligner. Il y a plusieurs actions que nous faisons dans des marchés pour essayer de sensibiliser la population, de prendre en compte les enjeux qui sont autour du changement climatique parce que nous subissons les dangers. Pourtant, la RDC est comme pays solution. Et en étant comme pays solution, nous pensons qu'il faut que les citoyens prennent de l'avant des actions en fait de concrétiser cet adage international disant que nous sommes un pays solution. Ici, c'était dans une école, vous voyez des élèves, on était parti sensibiliser comment comment est la campagne Stop EACOP et comment est-ce que la population de la RDC dans les jours qui viennent sera confrontée aux défis. On a essayé un peu de montrer comment est-ce que la population de l'Ouganda subit directement aujourd'hui des crises graves. Il y a des populations qui sont déplacées, il y a l'agricole et dans les jours qui viennent, ça peut être la RDC parce que la RDC aussi partage la frontière avec l'Ouganda et les deux gouvernements sont dans des pourparlers pour que l'exploitation du pétrole dans l'espace albertine puisse être exécutée. Je pense que j'ai fini par rapport à ces actions que nous faisons sur terrain. Merci.
Thank you so much, Baraka Mugisho, for this also very rich presentation of experience at grassroots. Because even in some of questions that I'm seeing, people are looking for ways of taking action, how to partner or with who to partner, what to do. So you have even responded to some of suggestion that Diana has made on what like people of faith can do. We know that you are from Laudato Si movements. You are also partnering with other organizations. So who is the church? We are the church. Therefore, guided by our faith and our faith leaders, the action we take in a small way are still very important to communicate, to make awareness, and to involve everybody. So we appreciate you and we congratulate you, especially that you tackle different campaigns at the same time, the EACOP and the Save Virunga, because we know also DRC has a lot when it comes to oil extraction. So I'm going to invite our next panelist. And this is Mr. Eloi. He is from Laudato Si movements. He acts from France, and it is very important to get a perspective from France, because when we talk about EACOP, we should not ignore Total Energy, the company that is supporting this project, and especially that has started the extraction in Tilenga place, as Diana has presented. Therefore, what is the perspective of France and what's going on at grassroots? What are some plans? And I think the presentation of Eloi will also show how Laudato Si movement, we also prioritize a solidarity, a global solidarity from global north and the global south in tackling this issue. So Eloi will speak in French. I beg for the Anglophones to remain in the same platform where you will get the interpretation simultaneous. Bienvenue, Eloi.
Merci beaucoup, Steven, et merci à toutes les personnes qui ont pris la parole jusqu'à maintenant. Parce que bien sûr, ce sont les personnes d'Afrique de l'Est qui sont les premières, qui sont les victimes de ce projet. Et donc, nous, en France, disons que c'est plutôt en soutien à toutes les personnes sur place qui vont subir les conséquences de ce projet. Donc, il y a bien sûr la biodiversité et les droits humains sur place. Et il y a aussi tout l'enjeu des émissions carbone. Donc là, bien sûr, ça concerne la Terre entière. Donc, la société civile en France, avec plusieurs ONG environnementales, est engagée depuis quelques années en soutien aux personnes d'Afrique de l'Est contre le projet EACOP. Et depuis à peu près 2022, il y a aussi les églises chrétiennes, catholiques, et qui sont, enfin, des personnes qui se sont engagées à partir de leur foi dans ce combat, et c'est ce qui nous intéresse aujourd'hui. Euh, voilà, en faisant un lien. Alors, peut-être que c'est plus évident dans d'autres parties du monde, mais en France, avec toute l'histoire de la séparation entre l'Église et l'État, c'est un peu délicat. C'est un sujet qui est pas toujours évident de s'engager explicitement, de faire un lien explicite entre la foi chrétienne et son engagement pour la justice, pour des enjeux plus structurels. Et donc, par ce projet EACOP, l'engagement contre cet oléoduc, certains chrétiens ont explicitement essayé de participer au débat public et de rejoindre des organisations environnementales non chrétiennes pour apporter une voix justement chrétienne à ce combat. Et donc en France, c'est pas forcément évident, contrairement à d'autres parties du monde. Donc ça dépend vraiment des contextes culturels. Et je vais vous montrer quelques actions. Donc, bien sûr, donc les cibles, c'est l'entreprise Total Energy en particulier parce que son siège est à Paris, enfin près de Paris, et aussi les financeurs français qui financent soit directement EACOP, soit qui financent EACOP, ou soit l'entreprise Total Energy. Euh, Alors, je partage mon écran. Donc voilà quelques exemples d'actions qui ont pu être menées par le mouvement Laudato aussi, et aussi d'autres organisations chrétiennes ou confessionnelles en France. Il y a notamment un collectif de jeunes chrétiens qui s'appelle Lutte et Contemplation, qui a été créé il y a à peu près un an, qui s'est beaucoup engagé dans ce combat contre ICOP. Et également, c'est un lieu de combat interreligieux où il y a l'association Greenface avec qui on travaille aussi en France pour s'associer pour des actions. Et donc, une manière de faire, c'est d'interpeller, ça a déjà été évoqué, d'interpeller nos responsables d'église, donc les évêques. En octobre 2022, il y a une tribune qui a été publiée dans le journal La Croix, qui est un grand journal catholique en France, le plus important, qui a été signée par 400 jeunes catholiques et qui demandait aux évêques français de se positionner contre ICOP. Donc ça a eu un certain écho. Ça a mis le sujet sur la table d'un point de vue de la foi chrétienne. Bon, malheureusement, les évêques français n'ont pas accédé à notre demande et n'ont pas voulu prendre position explicitement contre ICOP. Mais disons que ça a permis de mettre le sujet sur la table. Et derrière, d'autres actions plus concrètes et qu'on peut appeler peut-être spécifiquement chrétiennes, ou en tout cas avec une coloration chrétienne, ont eu lieu, notamment des cercles de silence qu'on a organisés au pied de la tour Total. Là, vous voyez deux photos de cercles de silence. Donc le bâtiment qu'on voit derrière, c'est la tour Total qui fait 200 mètres de haut, ou je ne sais pas combien, mais en tout cas qui est très haute. Ces cercles de silence consistaient à se mettre en cercle pendant 1 heure, en silence, debout, avec des bougies au milieu, des panneaux qui montraient notre opposition au projet EACOP, et donc tous les salariés de Total Energy, des milliers de salariés qui entraient dans l'entreprise, on leur distribuait des tracts et ils pouvaient voir ces cercles de silence. Donc c'était une de nos manières de protester contre le projet EACOP. Et c'est une manière d'agir qui a été assez, euh, assez appréciée par les militants, parce que c'est à la fois une manière d'être sur le terrain, d'être dans l'espace public, de montrer publiquement une opposition à un projet, mais tout en étant dans une sorte de prière, de méditation. Et je peux aussi citer, donc il y a des cercles de silence, il y en a eu pendant toute une semaine en février 2022, il y en a également eu en novembre 2023, avec des témoignages de militants d'Afrique de l'Est au début du cercle de silence. Et ensuite, une autre action qu'on a organisée en interreligieux cette fois-ci avec Greenface, c'était une veillée de prière interreligieuse en commémoration aux victimes des énergies fossiles, donc plus généralement de Total, parce que Total a fêté ses 100 ans le mois dernier. Donc à l'occasion des 100 ans de l'entreprise, il y a eu plein de cérémonies officielles, et nous on a voulu créer une sorte de contre-récit, et il y a eu une très belle prière interreligieuse qui a été organisée qui donnait la voix à toutes les personnes qu'on n'entend pas habituellement. Euh, voilà, donc voilà quelques exemples d'actions qui ont pu être menées en France par des chrétiens ou des personnes religieuses contre EACOP. Et je pense que je vais arrêter là parce que j'aurai un autre moment pour parler des actions à venir pour l'Assemblée générale de Total dans quelques semaines. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much, Eloi, also for this wonderful presentation. We are discovering that we are all in action all over the world from different corners, tackling the same issues. And this is what we call solidarity. Yeah, sometimes we blame the global north, but also this shows that there are people of goodwill in the global north that are working to support what we are advocating for. So this is a concrete example also how the church can start in solidarity from global south and the global north in finding action, especially working on stopping EACOP. So I think we have no other speaker. Before I call for some questions to you who are here, it's only Diana who has left, but she also responded to some questions. Other questions we try also to come in. Maybe I would wish also to request you, Eloi, you come in again, share about this Total Energy AGM, so that even the questions that will come can also tackle on that same in case. That would be great.
Ok, donc je peux parler maintenant des actions en vue de
Oui.
l'Assemblée générale. Très bien, alors je vais partager
Yes.
à nouveau mon écran. Voilà, donc je vais vous parler d'une action qui a lieu, pareil, dans un contexte interreligieux. Alors juste pour donner le contexte, ce qui nous occupe beaucoup en ce moment en Europe, c'est les élections du Parlement européen qui sont début juin. Donc, en France, on a un gros travail de plaidoyer en vue des élections européennes pour que l'enjeu écologique soit pris en compte dans le choix des électeurs et parce on a un risque d'une qu'on appelle une remise en cause de tous les progrès écologiques avec la montée de l'extrême droite et du climato-scepticisme, etc. Donc, c'est un de nos gros axes de plaidoyer en ce moment. Et notamment, on a écrit une lettre aux candidats aux élections européennes qui a été signée par beaucoup de congrégations, d'organisations catholiques et chrétiennes en France. Donc c'est assez unique, où on demande aux candidats leurs engagements, notamment autour de la sortie des énergies fossiles et la justice climatique internationale. Donc là, on voit le lien entre ce plaidoyer et le combat contre EACOP, avec cette justice climatique internationale et la sortie des énergies fossiles. Et aussi le lien, c'est que je vous rappelle ou je l'apprends peut-être pour certains, en septembre 2022, le Parlement européen a voté une résolution pour s'opposer au projet EACOP. Donc on voit que les deux ont des liens et aussi ça se joue parfois au niveau enfin, on peut avoir un soutien ou au contraire être freiné par le Parlement européen. Donc c'est un de nos gros axes de plaidoyer. En parallèle de ça, il y a une action spécifique qui va avoir lieu pour l'Assemblée générale de Total Energy, qui est donc le 24 mai, donc dans 2 semaines, même pas dans 10 jours. C'est une action qui est organisée en lien avec Greenface et d'autres organisations religieuses. L'objectif, c'est de réunir 1443 jeûneurs et jeûneuses, comme le nombre de kilomètres du de l'oléoduc EACOP. Il faut que 1443 personnes prennent l'engagement de jeûner au moins une journée dans la semaine de l'AG, donc la semaine du 24 mai, c'est-à-dire la semaine prochaine. Donc les personnes peuvent être en France, mais n'importe où dans le monde. Donc voilà, si jamais vous voulez vous engager concrètement contre EACOP dans les prochains jours, eh ben, j'ai mis les liens et je pense qu'on vous les transmettra, ou bien vous pouvez essayer, ou je les mettrai dans la conversation là tout de suite. Et vous pourrez être l'un ou l'une des 1443 jeûneurs ou jeûneuses en vue de l'AG. Et l'objectif, c'est de réclamer l'arrêt immédiat d'EACOP et manifester notre soutien aux frères et sœurs en Ouganda et Tanzanie qui sont touchés par ce projet. Il y aura aussi une action symbolique le jour de l'AG avec des responsables religieux de différentes confessions qui, voilà, qui mangeront un repas sur une table vide pour signifier le jeûne qui a une signification forte dans toutes nos traditions religieuses. Donc dans notre religion chrétienne aussi, le jeûne, ça montre voilà, la tristesse, l'effort et le désir de conversion. Donc c'est une action qui a du sens symboliquement pour s'opposer à EACOP à l'approche de l'AG. Voilà, donc je voulais vous mentionner cette action concrète qui est à venir parce que c'est la semaine prochaine. Et donc n'hésitez pas, vous pouvez vous inscrire en français ou en anglais. Les liens sont dans la présentation et j'essaierai de vous les transmettre. Voilà, merci.
Thank you so much, Eloi, once again, for sharing this opportunity of doing advocacy on stopping EACOP during this annual General Assembly. And now I think there has been rich information that we've gotten from Diana, from Samuel, from Baraka, from Elua. Yeah, we were also to have Tanzania I lost a bit my internet. So I was saying that the situation of Uganda is connected to Tanzania, and the situation in Tanzania has a bit of particularity because of the lack of freedom of actions, freedom of expression is at high level. So maybe the situation is more silent in Tanzania than in Uganda. And that is a worse situation that we can experience. We've heard that there are even activists at the ground that has been arrested for their work advocating against this pipeline. I would like to allow now some questions. And I'm sorry, once again, I want to request our panelists to reflect on some few questions that are here. Some are comments, But there is a question from Francis Kamau. I don't know if there is somebody in Uganda, like John Hiradi, if you are able to unmute yourself, or if someone has something to say about it. The question was addressed to Diana. Have you approached green energy investors who would be willing to support you and divert the attention to green energy in equal measure? Because EACOP has come to fill a vacuum. The vacuum needs to be filled by environmental friendly energy source, because I believe there is still energy deficit in the region. Maybe this question, each one of you can take it from your own understanding, because the motivation by Total Energy and Project EACOP is about energy. But we know very well that EACOP will not benefit the people of Uganda or the people of Tanzania. The high level percentage of benefits will go to China, another will go to Total Energy. Uganda will receive just a very minimum. I would like to know what is your point, if either you can or somewhere, before also we ask Elwa. Each one can use 30 seconds or 1 minute.
Okay, I hope my internet does not disappoint. Yes, there's a lot of efforts around renewable energy. Actually, AFIEGO, Laudato Si movement, and other organizations, we are part of we call it the IGEN network. It's just a movement, initiative that brings together, organizations working around renewable energy. Sustainability is not dependent on fossil fuels. Of course, there's a long way to go, because it involves, private investment and all of that. But yes, the efforts are actually there. IGEN is not just, IGEN is the inclusive green economy network connecting East Africa. It's not just for you, because the problem is not just Ugandan. So yes, there's efforts in that direction. Yes, we are working towards that.
Sorry, Hiradi, because the internet. So we are talking about this question. I don't know if somebody else, either Elwa or somewhere, if you have something to talk about it. There is this propaganda by EACOP that they are coming in with opportunities of providing energy, providing jobs and other things. And this is where the question is from Francis Kamau. What is the contribution of the green energy actors?
Yeah, I can try to say a word. Ou désolé, je peux parler en français, si c'est possible. Je suis pas sûr de. Alors, je pourrais pas répondre sur le contexte local en Afrique de l'Est parce que j'ai pas la réponse sur à quel point les acteurs de l'énergie renouvelable peuvent euh, agir, proposer des solutions en Afrique de l'Est. Ce qui est sûr, et je vais peut-être ajouter ça parce que j'ai oublié d'en parler tout à l'heure, c'est vrai qu'une autre de nos actions, c'est de demander aux individus ou aux institutions religieuses ou à n'importe quelle institution de désinvestir des énergies fossiles. Et donc forcément, désinvestir des énergies fossiles, donc par exemple désinvestir de Total Energy, ce qui est le cas en France, le diocèse de Grenoble, qui est une ville dans le sud-ouest de la France, du sud-est, a déjà désinvesti de Total Energy à cause d'EACOP pour des raisons éthiques. Et ben forcément, une fois qu'on désinvestit des énergies fossiles, on réinvestit son argent dans d'autres entreprises et donc possiblement dans des énergies renouvelables. Je sais pas répondre pour l'Afrique de l'Est comment ça se passe, mais en tout cas, c'est sûr que désinvestir au total, ça permet d'avoir de l'argent pour d'autres projets et potentiellement des projets d'énergie renouvelable. Après, je pense que c'est dur de savoir comment investir concrètement en Tanzanie et en Ouganda sur ces projets, même si j'imagine que c'est possible. Je ne sais pas si j'ai répondu à la question, mais en tout cas, voilà ce que je pouvais dire sur le sujet.
Thank you so much. I was looking at the exact percentage in order to make it clear to Francis Kamau that this EACOP is not filling any vacuum to provide energy in Uganda or Tanzania or anywhere. Already, once this oil is extracted in Uganda, channeled to Tanga and taken away, the EACOP projects will benefit 62%, and Uganda will benefit 15%, Tanzania will benefit 15%, and the CNOC will benefit 8%. CNOC is China National Offshore Oil Corporation. This is the one extracting the Kingfisher sites. Therefore, you can see already this is a theft, providing everything. There are these companies to operate without paying tax. This is where a whole country will lose. This is a situation where Uganda was promised even to have a company for treating this oil at grass in the country, but the promise is no longer there. It's a disappointment. This means there is no goodwill from EACOP so that we can say that EACOP is coming in to fill any vacuum. EACOP has its interest, and the interest is at high level. We've not yet seen any commitment of EACOP also making it easy for Ugandans or Tanzanians to have energy. Therefore, I don't see any vacuum that they are coming in to fill this energy deficit in the region. Actually, they are bringing problem in our region because the science and the statistics that we have of science are clear. The climate crisis that we have today, we cannot really allow the world to keep extracting oil, while there are options of promoting green energy the way it has been shown in the presentations by our panelists. I would like maybe to request John Hillary once again. John Hillary is the chapter coordinator of Laudato Si movement in Uganda, and he has been also very active in taking action on this matter in Uganda. There is a question from Bernadette Brown, and it's regarding this South African Standard Bank's involvement in the EACOP project. She would like to know if at least their commitments toward EACOP has ended. If there's somebody in Uganda or here, if you have any idea, I should be happy to get this feedback.
I hope my internet doesn't disappoint this time. Okay, I don't know if the question is if Stan stopped. It was then, I think. So I have better band. Well, no, Standard Bank has still been one of the lead finances of EACOP, and the pressure is the thing is these people don't stop until they don't stop if the pressure is not as much. At the last AGM of Standard Bank, there was a lot of action. There's a lot of action targeting Standard Bank in Uganda.
About the involvement of Standard Bank, but if not this question, we also take it to Diana or anybody from Afiego, and you will have a feedback. Cool. We see that, yes. So we see that there are also a comment from Eve on involvement in Senegal with the youth in taking action. And I think this is another situation in Senegal, because we know that there is a discovery of oil and the gas, and there is also the program of just transition, just energy transition. But what I see from the question from Eve is that he has been involved at the ground, but while discussing with some leaders that he is in a movement for ecology, then people will call him that it is lack of patriotism. Défenseur de l'écologie. Then he gets this feedback that it's a lack of patriotism. So there are situations of countries where when you stand against all these atrocities caused by oil companies or defending the climate justice, so people consider you as a puppet of West countries, or they consider you as you are against interest of the country, your own country. Maybe any of you has something to comment or to encourage people who have been taking action in West Africa. Disconnect with the socio-political life of our activists at the ground. Any of our panelists can make comment on this. Of course, it goes to the issues of freedom of action and the position of our countries when it comes to this oil business.
Steve, je peux?
Yes, come on. Allez-y, Barak.
Bon, je ne sais pas si j'ai bien compris la question, mais le peu que j'ai compris, il y a cette question qui revient, que lorsque vous défendez, lorsque vous disiez non à l'exploitation du pétrole, et même ici en RDC, parce que le gouvernement congolais aussi avait mis aux enchères les 27 blocs pétroliers et 3 gaziens de la RDC. Lorsque vous essayez un peu d'aborder ce sujet, on vous taxe aussi de ne pas être un vrai patriote parce que les gens estiment que une fois qu'on exploite le pétrole, il y aura beaucoup de revenus au pays, il y aura beaucoup d'emplois qui seront créés et la population va en bénéficier. Mais ils ne font pas céder à cette question. La réponse, elle est celle. Nous essayons un peu de montrer les conséquences des énergies fossiles sur l'environnement. Et nous essayons de montrer que ces énergies ne sont pas durables. Ils ont un temps qui est limité. Mais si nous courons aux énergies renouvelables, ces énergies sont éternelles et ces énergies aussi peuvent apporter des bénéfices au pays et des bénéfices à la création d'emplois. Donc, il faut se focaliser, lorsque de telles questions arrivent, il faut se focaliser pour démontrer les conséquences des énergies fossiles et essayer un peu d'argumenter tant soit peu sur les avantages des énergies renouvelables. Moi, je pense que c'est la manière la plus simple de répondre à cette question parce que ça arrive des fois. Merci.
Thank you so much, Baraka. And I would like to invite everybody to copy the links that has been shared in the chat box. They are very important links where you will get more information about Stop EACOP, about Laudato Si movements and the action against EACOP, action also on divestment. There are links that have been shared by John Hillary, the chapter coordinator of Laudato Si movement in Uganda, about the efforts that has been made in promoting clean energy. And I would like to invite Father Benedict Ayodi, who is also our programs coordinator of Laudato Si movement in Africa and also in charge of circles. Father, maybe you give us one word or a word of wisdom on this as you bless us and we close this. And before you give us these blessings, I would like to to thank you so much, Elwa, Baraka, John Hillary, to appreciate also Diana, who has left, to appreciate Samuel for your very rich presentation. I'm sure the participants who are here have learned a lot, and you've gotten resources that have been shared in the chat box, because there is a lot to learn and know what's going on and how. You've gotten one or two things that will guide you to make a next step. I don't know if Father, you are still with us. Father Ben. Right, he must have stepped out for another meeting, but let us put our hearts together as we close this meeting, this webinar, very rich in ideas, in testimonies, a webinar that has raised a voice of voiceless people who are at grassroots, suffering from the impact caused by EACOP projects. A webinar that has brought on board people of goodwill, people who want to learn and take action, people who are willing to stand in solidarity, people who are willing to share knowledge and resources. May God see us through in our ambitious mission that will become a reality. May God give us energy and the resources that we need so that we can serve the people of God, so that we can help people from Global South, people who are affected by the new neocolonialism system caused by multinationals, companies that are stealing from the poor, that are wounding our earth. May we all be strengthened. Our faith is strong in us, and that is where we get our courage. That is where we fetch our energy. Faith is our guide, and that faith, we believe that we are doing all this in the name of God and as a mission of God, so that we can also be able to accomplish the wish of our Holy Father, Pope Francis, who has been very clear that EACOP should stop because it harms our common home. It continues also harming our poor people at grassroots. Therefore, who are we? Our work is to support the mission of our church, the mission of Laudato Si. Our solidarity matters. From France to Uganda to Tanzania, to Kenya to Senegal, Zimbabwe, Zambia, South Africa, and the many, many other countries that are suffering from impact of oil extraction. Many, many countries that has been invaded by Total Energy. We know that this is another form of colonialism that we are experiencing, and we should not allow them to keep stealing from the poor countries that are already suffering from debts that they've been inflicted by Global South countries, Global North countries, while there is still an ecological debt between the Global North and the Global South, as Pope Francis underlined it in chapter 51 of Laudato Si. So we stand together as one. May God bless you all. Let us all keep in touch. Let us all check on each other. Since this fight is not easy, people at grassroots keep us informed. Some questions are to know, how can people be involved? We saw it in chat box, but we are here. Already Laudato Si movement contacted you. We are part of this fight. Therefore, if you are to be involved, just contact us. God will bless you for any small action you will do in order to stop EACOP in Africa and other projects by Total Energy that are harming communities and our common home. Be blessed all. I thank you for your time. We thank you for sharing resources and the knowledge. We appreciate also Chris Mondia, who has been behind the scenes supporting us technically. We appreciate all who have contributed to this, and Raul for supporting the interpretation. Be blessed. We thank you. Now I invite you to, at least the panelists, to open your microphone and the camera and say goodbye and say thank you to all participants who are here with us.
Merci beaucoup à tous les participants et les speakers. Et merci.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Merci à tous les participants, merci à tous les intervenants pour l'attention accordée à ces réunions, ces webinaires d'aujourd'hui. Merci, sincèrement.
Merci. Thank you. Hilary, we thank you also for your time. I know internet is not easy from your side. So have a nice evening, everyone. We keep in touch.